So, welcome to our session on the IP Manifesto for COVID-19 research. Wherever you are, I hope you are well. As our president said in the State of the Union speech last week, a virus 1,000 times smaller than a grain of sand, COVID-19, laid bare the limits of a model that values wealth above well-being. We are in this together, and we will get out of this together. The fight against the pandemic has mobilized research and innovation more than ever before across the globe. And I'm very proud that the European Union started the Corona Global Response, leading to a pledge of 16 billion euros of investment in research and innovation. And an agreed objective is to make the results, whether diagnostics, treatment, or vaccine, accessible and affordable to all. Everyone agrees on that objective, but how to reach it is less obvious. Sharing is an effective way to reach accessibility and affordability. This requires to make scientific papers, data, and results publicly accessible without delay, and to grant non-exclusive royalty-free licenses during the pandemic. That's a big change to normal practice, but there's nothing normal in these times. For new COVID-19 research funded by the EU, we will put the accessibility and affordability principles I just mentioned in the grant agreement. But we want to reach out beyond these projects. The more subscribe to these principles, the better. And that exactly is the purpose of this manifesto and our session today. For me personally, the session is a dream come true. I'm delighted to welcome here the first movers, the trendsetters, who have signed up to this manifesto. I start with Silvia Gomez. She is the Secretary General of YERUN, the Young European Research Universities Network, covering 17 universities in 11 member states and teaching more than 300,000 students across Europe. Silvia, without your enthusiastic support from YERUN, we might not have been able to launch the manifesto. Thank you so much. Then I would welcome Siobhan Horan from Knowledge Transfer Ireland, Ireland's very successful Center for Industry Academia Partnership and Knowledge Valorization. And Knowledge Transfer Ireland is a key supporter to our knowledge valorization policies, and I'm very grateful for that. Then I welcome Michaela Meyerhofer. She is head of everything that matters, that's ethics, legal, and societal issues, at the European Research Infrastructure for Biobanking, the BBMRI, with 16 members across Europe. And BBMRI has been among the very first signatories right after the publication of the manifesto in July, and reinforcing with that our ideas that we were and we are on the right path. And last but certainly not least, Renaud Deus. He's president of the European University Institute, Europe's postgraduate and postdoc teaching and research institute. Professor Deus is one of the finest thinkers on comparative federalism and on the institutional evolution of the European Union. Great to have the support of this institute, of your institute, for this initiative. So we will hear now from these first four thought leaders why they joined, whether it was difficult to get a decision in their institution, and why they think this is the right thing to do. And then we would like to enter in a debate with all of you following us on the web. And for that, you can use the question and answer function on our website here. If you want to have a more direct question or make contact, you can also use the chat function. But on the question and answers, we will publish the question and you can vote so that we can interact with our panelists and thought leaders who started this movement. I hope all is clear, and we start immediately with the discussion. Silvia, the floor is yours for the first kickoff impulse statement.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for inviting us to be here today. For us, it's really an honor. And I have to say that I'm also surprised, greatly surprised, that we are among the first ones supporting this manifesto. So just wanted to give a little bit more information about our network and who we are. We are young research universities in Europe, and I many times get this question about what is a young university. And a young university, we decided to put a cap, let's say, and say those that are established after the 60s. And they are all traditionally, let's say, well, traditionally should not be in their definition, but they are known to be more flexible, more agile, more interdisciplinary, more responding to challenges that society has. All universities do that, let's say, but they have to say they had less time to prove themselves and to make sure that they were doing good things and quality work. So I would say that this is something that is in their mindset and has helped to sign up to this manifesto. We have to take into account that when we decided to sign the manifesto, we were already embarked upon a policy on open science. I think is very much connected to this. So in 2017, it was when our members decided already to propose a policy that would set already their ambitions to embark upon progression of open science practices at their institutions. Many of the things that we said at that time in 2017 are not yet fully accomplished. It's not that because we set the scene, then we are the quickest to be there, but at least we are monitoring and progressing, and we as a network are incentivizing the developments that our members are doing in open science practices. And it is within that context, and when we saw the manifesto and we read it for the first time, points 1 and 2, as you can see in the manifesto if you read it, so namely, it's making results public and accessible, making scientific papers and research data available in open access. These are principles that our members have been working already with for several years, and that they have been dedicating human resources and infrastructure to put in place such a mechanism, really, to be able to give the researchers the environment to operate in such a culture. We know, and discussing with them, they pointed out that many of the researchers are already also participating in the Open Research Data Pilot in Horizon 2020. So a majority of the researchers that are participating already in funding from the European Union, they are really, really, really prone to these principles. Now, of course, point number 3, let's say, got into maybe some other discussions, for sure, on non-exclusivity and royalty-free licenses, but maybe just 2 questions more than hard points for discussion. We were also prone to include other things in the manifesto, and we were very happy to see the references to fair data. It is not only to open up results immediately, but making it in a way that other researchers can properly use it. But I think when we look really into the third part, it is also why it becomes very important to sign such a manifesto. And it's like, of course, point number 3 could raise questions when our researchers are working with commercial partners. Some commercial partners may not agree with these licenses, let's say, and they would prefer operating a different way. But I think this really brings up the unprecedented times that we are all living in. And we need to remember that back in March, our war was really stopped. And everything had to stop. And I think for the very first time, things were not at all normal. So this unprecedented situation really calls for unprecedented solutions and measures. For us, supporting this manifesto is a way to highlight that there is an importance in openness and a social responsibility in the research that our institutions do and perform, especially when this is something coming from public research funding. So for us, in COVID-19 related outputs, results, and products, because it is a huge dimension, the problem is everyone's problem. There is actually no space for exclusivity. So nobody can really tackle this alone, and all possible cooperation among any partner is absolutely required. So I think this is really what brings us to signing this manifesto and why our members found it. I have to say, there were only questions, not oppositions within our members, and we got their agreement quite quickly. Even in sometimes it was around July when we were getting the agreement, and our northern countries are all on vacation, and they replied quite quickly as well. So I have to say that we are happy to be in this initiative, and we are happy to be supportive of this. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you again, Sylvia. And I'm now very curious whether it was similar for Knowledge Transfer Ireland, where you are much closer at the market valorization. So Siobhan, how was it with you in Knowledge Transfer Ireland?
So I guess similar to other countries throughout Europe, the extraordinary and I guess unprecedented challenges posed by the coronavirus pandemic have really underscored the importance of industry research collaborations. And in Ireland, Knowledge Transfer Ireland sits in the middle of that system. We are the office that makes it easier for industry to access the great technologies and expertise available throughout the Irish research system. And we ensure that it's very easy for industry to connect with the system and also to access that intellectual property in a very transparent manner. So it's really our mission fits with the Manifesto for EU COVID-19 research in trying to promote the accessibility of research throughout the country. So what we did in Ireland back in March, as the coronavirus pandemic really took hold throughout Europe and throughout Ireland, was we worked very closely with the technology transfer offices throughout the Irish universities and research organisations. And we led in the development of a very short 2-page COVID-19 related non-exclusive royalty-free license agreement template. We developed this in partnership with the TTOs throughout Ireland and really got buy-in from all of them and ensured that this agreement is now in widespread use throughout the country. And this agreement has been really, really important for us because it really does speed up the dissemination of any very critical COVID-related research. And it also sends a very clear message to industry in Ireland that the research base is very willing to engage with them and really wants to get involved in the development and the creation of new technologies that could potentially bring an end to the coronavirus pandemic. So it's been really key to get this agreement in place throughout the Irish knowledge transfer system. And it's also just a very great message to send out to Irish society. Throughout Ireland, we're very pleased to have a very strong knowledge transfer system where all the organisations work very closely together. We also have a very clear national policy on research commercialisation, which is a really key asset to us in the country. And it really does specify how research commercialisation, research valorisation should operate throughout the country. And it really does stress that the research organisations that receive public funding throughout the state should be operating in line with the interests of the Irish economy and society at large. And really, COVID-19 has really highlighted how well the system is working together.
Siobhan, thank you so much. I don't want to get carried away, but when you say you have a new form of new buy-in, you had a buy-in from companies, and you're symbolizing the willingness of universities to engage with companies. Do you see this as putting the cursor a bit more towards closer cooperation, or is it a temporary thing only?
Well, the COVID-19 NERF will be in place until such a time as the WHO announces an end to the pandemic. So it will be around for, who knows, but quite a while, most likely. But we are very pleased to see the great buy-in from the Irish universities. We started working very closely with some of the early adopters within the system to develop this new template. We worked on the drafting of the agreement within Knowledge Transfer Ireland and then managed to secure the buy-in of all research organisations throughout Ireland. So there has been great commitment shown from the Irish research sector to developing this template and getting research and technologies out into society very quickly. And we have seen this agreement has been used. I mean, the usage of the agreement is still quite limited because it's not always appropriate in all situations, but it really does show the willingness of the research system to move in a very quick manner to get the technologies and expertise out there.
Thanks a lot. Thanks again. Michaela, your research infrastructure unites patients, industry, and academia. How was it in your discussions about this manifesto and its principles?
Well, I can tell you first, thank you for the invitation. And second, it was one of the easiest and fastest discussions that we ever had, because there was literally no question whether we should sign up, as signing up is in line with our core values of BBMRI, and that is to facilitate access, to promote the European research area. And along these lines of moving fair and linking it up to fairness, so the capital fair to the principle of fairness, it was simply the right thing to do. And the pandemic has shown us as a research infrastructure what we knew already and what is possible in times when it's necessary, how fast researchers can work together, how fast research infrastructures can work together. And from the BBMRI side, that encompasses indeed 16 member states plus 5 observers, so representing 21 European member states and the national nodes, if you will, in the area of biobanking, was to team up with our fellow research infrastructures, most notably ECRAN and EATRIS, responsible for translational research as well as clinical trials, to see where we can interconnect and work together, as everything that we do relates to the fact that we are dealing with highly sensitive data, that the aspects of vulnerability in open access especially become even more important and have to balance out the principles of protecting the privacy of research participants and citizens, as well as enabling research for the wider common good. And in that, we share the idea to move forward within an initiative called AMRI EU, where the research infrastructures also collaborate together, because we see that here and there we are complementary. And we have seen within the pandemic crisis, within a couple of weeks, what we can achieve. And again, that this is not limited to the research infrastructures alone, but that the goal has to be whatever is out there needs to be interconnected, needs to be complementary to each other in order to account for the fact that, as we know, and also now feel, disease does not know any borders. And ultimately, everything we as a scientific community, as a society, we do has to fit into all the puzzle pieces to make an advancement possible for really the benefit of society at large. And here, the understanding that we, thanks to our stakeholder forum, also have, and the links to the clinical sides, is that the various viewpoints, the various cultures from academia, research, industry, the needs of patient advocacy groups needs to be taken into account. And then once the goal is clear that we want to tackle and defeat ultimately the disease, things come together really quickly. And therefore, it was so easy to sign the manifesto, accelerating research, accelerating collaboration, and ultimately avoiding that the wheel is reinvented anew, that all of us have different viewpoints, but that together we form, if you like, a wonderful kilt that keeps us warm, whatever the next pandemic might be.
Thank you very much, Michaela. I hear from all three so far that the pressure from this unprecedented crisis helps a lot to engage in more cooperation. Would you say that the manifesto for you was not any change of practice, because you say it's part of your core values, or has it changed something, or is it changing something?
It changes not the core values, but it at least for me it specifies it, and it produces an unbelievable momentum that we can use as a driver to move forward. And I believe that without the manifesto, we would maybe be a little bit closer to stick to the community that we know, rather than even taking the next step forward to collaborate even more.
Understand. Thank you. Renaud, what about the European University Institute? Difficult decision to join?
No, not at all. For two reasons, essentially. One is that there was a widespread awareness of the importance of the challenge we were facing, and as the previous speakers have highlighted, it also espoused rather nicely core values that we attach to our work. But let me develop these 2 points. First, for those who would not know the European University Institute, it is actually home of what is, I think, the largest doctoral and postdoctoral program in the social sciences and the humanities in Europe. And it is also a center for research on, well, a wide range of issues of relevance to understand today's and tomorrow's problems of the European Union. So for us, COVID is not, because we are social scientists and specialists in the humanities, COVID is not simply the name of a virus, it's also the name of a huge crisis that really has a momentous impact on, well, you name it, our economies, our societies, interstate relations, and concerns topics as diverse as forms of socialization, forms of communication, the role of science in public policy, the role of the state, and so on and so forth. I'll stop here because otherwise the enumeration can become tedious, but you get my point. It's a central issue for any social scientist, and that's why it wasn't difficult to convince colleagues of the fact that this was an issue over which we should focus our attention for some time. And that, by the way, is a phenomenon that you can witness across the whole of the social science and humanities community in Europe. We've developed dozens of cooperative projects with our regular partners, new partners, and so on and so forth. So that's the first part of the answer. The second is that, of course, you find in the manifesto references to values to which we strongly adhere. Of course, not all the problems that are mentioned therein do apply in the social sciences in the same way that they do in the life sciences. For instance, much to my regret, licensing is less of a problem. But in this case, what, let's say, for us was a matter of great attention was the fact that we found in the manifesto an echo to key values, values such as open access and open science, which are really central in our daily work. Now, you might say, what is the point of signing a manifesto? Is this simply a symbolic exercise? Not quite. Not quite, because it's one thing to adhere to values. It's quite another thing to, let's say, fight, if you allow me, to make sure that those values are duly developed and preserved. And yes, we all recognized in our statements the value of open access, but is open access already a dominant form of dissemination of information in, certainly in the disciplines I know best? I can say not at all. So there remains a lot of work to be done, and our signing the manifesto is witnessing our commitment to push forward the cause of open access. Likewise with open science. I noticed with great interest, for instance, in the Manifesto, a reference to the COVID data portal that has been created and that we recognize as a crucial element in the development of open science in relation to COVID research. But what about the social sciences? The social sciences are a major producer of data. We have to develop a culture of sharing and reuse of the data that is made available by the research that we conduct in our respective institutions. We need, in other words, an instrument such as a COVID data portal for the social sciences. But of course, this is something that is, because we are talking of a public good, it will be difficult for any single institution to produce on its own. So more efforts are needed, and probably support is also needed for that kind of initiative. So you see, on our side, it was not merely the recognition of the importance of COVID in the social sciences as a major topic, not only for today, but for the years to come, but also a recognition that in order to promote the values we stand for, we have to develop forms of partnerships with other organizations, other types of actors as well.
Thank you very much. Would you think this is a more general trend which will continue once we have overcome the pandemic? Or yeah,
I certainly hope so, because I think never waste a good crisis. And God knows that here is a crisis of whose existence is widely recognized. We know that there are negationists, but let's say they tend to be a minority. And we have here an opportunity to promote values and practices that have value on a larger scale beyond COVID. So I hope that we won't miss this opportunity.
Thank you very much. I will now reach out also to you out there and on following us digitally. Please reach out to our speakers here, to those who are changing the way we share research results. And while you pose your questions, I have a question to all of you, because you say it was easy, core values, quickly done, and this was not at all the experience we had when reaching out to quite a number of associations, institutes, where actually, and in the course of discussion, we had also learned a lot and adjusted the text, and made it better, but also less committing. So I think really you are the exception. Is that something you encounter more often in your contacts? Are you seen as the exception, or have we been in contact with those who are the exception? So has any one of you had heard from someone else, no, I would never sign that? Sylvia, I think you are, or Michaela, smiling.
Yeah, I can't take the question. I was just having some issues with unmuting my mic. Well, I have to say that normally we tend to, with the other university associations present in Brussels, we tend to have alignment and let's say same line of thinking as to what universities should thrive for in the future. So normally we do collaborate with them quite often without any problem. I didn't hear back of any of them saying we would not sign this manifesto. So I don't know. For us, it was really easy in the sense of what I was explaining a little bit within the context of our open science policy. And I think in the context of COVID, that is That is something that I think we are all stressing, but it has to really be stressed. One of the key things that we saw happening in our institutions with the lockdown was that the social character and the social activities and the social responsibilities of the universities came to be the first thing that they were focusing on. So of course they had to put in place the educational system to make sure that their students would continue following their classes. They had to ensure some very restricted access to labs on things that otherwise would have been completely wasted, but otherwise things were completely locked down as well. But then they reinforced their reaching to their communities. So I think that is something that has changed completely in their mindset. And that is something that it was already very present. I think our universities have always, they were developed or they were created in areas where they needed to work within their communities to reinforce the regions where they were. And they are used to work with other partners. They are used also to work with industry. And I think they are more prone to this kind of collaboration. But we tend to see ourselves as young universities as being special. So I'm happy that in this respect, they are considered quite special. So that from our side.
Thanks. Anyone else from you who want to come in on this point, encountered any difficulties? Michaela, please.
I can also not share of any difficulties or knowing about organizations who did have. However, I can also reinforce the fact that as BBMRI, we have a transdisciplinary environment, reaching from quality management, population-based clinics, to IT, to data experts, to lawyers even. And in that regard, we are constantly used, since we started out as a research infrastructure, to reflect on our values, to develop a culture. And in that sense, when this crisis hit us, as regards to general operation, the switch to do it in the digital space was a matter of hours. And the hard work was obviously done in the clinic. And the feedback that we were getting then back, and the discussions that we were having, was indeed that every work that was ongoing was working as any crisis mode. If you have already a relatively good crisis modality in place to which you can switch when it comes, because you cannot come up with a plan while you're hit by the crisis, but to operate within it. Nonetheless, it has put a devastating burden on the system, and everybody I talk to on the multi levels in the clinic had an experience that also links up to our colleagues from social science, that it is society that was hit. It is our way of putting things together, of organizing our work that was hit and challenged. And in some aspects, we see that it works unbelievably well. We see that collaboration is the way forward. That allows us to really focus on the common good. I think it is more difficult if you are not used to the interdisciplinary work, but then I can only speculate why others would not have signed. So I'm sorry if not being helpful here.
You are very helpful. You are very helpful, and actually you're doing very well. We have already on the chat someone who would like to, or people out there wanting to get in touch with you, patent pools. So you're starting to mobilize more players. That's very good. We have one question, which is perhaps for you, Renaud. Would you think this should be the publicly funded research? Should that be insisting on non-exclusive licensing because it's a public good, or should it be strictly limited to an extraordinary crisis? And thanks for this question here, whoever has put it. Perhaps starting with you, Renaud.
Thank you. Well, as I said, it would be easy for me to be quite radical in my answer, because it's a problem that largely does not apply in the areas in which we are active. So we can have a very strongly principled answer and say, well, it's publicly funded, so of course it follows that it should be made publicly available. I do understand that the problem may be a bit more complex than that, however, and I think it's important to have, and I appreciate the, let's say, somewhat balanced avenue outlined in the manifesto, because it is important, of course, to ensure that we get, as we said, COVID is one thing, and there are emergency measures that are needed because of the extreme gravity of the crisis. Does it follow that the emergency solutions are valid in the long term? I would call for, let's say, a little discussion with all stakeholders in answering that question, because I think it's important to think of what the long-term situation will be. So I would urge for caution, but caution does not mean ignoring our basic principles. It means simply recognizing that problems are complex.
Yeah. Okay. Related to this, there is a question about the incentives. A very interesting question. How do we make sure that there will be enough incentives? Siobhan or Michaela, would you like to answer to that? Siobhan?
Sorry, I'm just unmuting my microphone. Sorry, could you just repeat that question? The question was about the incentives to sign up to the manifesto, or around the use of the agreements?
Yeah, incentives. I imagine this is linked to the question of non-exclusive licensing. How to ensure that there are enough incentives to engage on that basis? Because for some institutes, license revenues can make the difference between being a good institution and a great institution, right, in terms of resources.
So when it comes to the COVID-19 NERF, we haven't actually mandated the use of the COVID-19 NERF throughout the Irish system. We have left that up to each of the institutions, because it's not always appropriate to use that agreement in each case. You know, sometimes when you're dealing with industry, they may require exclusivity for certain reasons, which is completely fine. It comes down to the exact details of the research project in which it's involved. And also, you'll also have the situation from time to time that the grant recipient may not actually be the owner of the intellectual property, in which case the NERF wouldn't apply. So I think really, you know, the value of the NERF is really helping the research institution to get involved in that societal fight against COVID-19, and I think there is a lot of goodwill. We're seeing that here in Ireland. You know, apart from collaborative research, we've seen a lot of the universities get involved through use of campuses for community testing facilities, use of research labs to 3D print PPE equipment. You know, a lot of academics getting involved in national advisory groups. A lot of different research teams as well coming together to, you know, develop the testing solution for COVID-19 when there was global shortage of that. So there's definitely a lot of goodwill amongst Irish universities. And also, you know, it is part of our national research commercialisation policy that all the universities and research organisations are signed up to, that the publicly funded research in Ireland is to be used for the good of all society. So that is written into our policy. So it didn't really take a lot to get buy-in into the COVID-19 NERF, because I think it is in line with the objectives of the technology transfer offices within our institutions.
I understand. And Michaela, for you, a problem with incentives, or how can we incentivize more? What could we do from our side, funders, policymakers, to strengthen the incentives?
That is indeed the golden ticket question. The incentives that our community obviously knows is through open calls.
Michaela, can you hear that?
I can hear that. I hope you can hear me. All right. I take it as a yes that you can hear me. It's the golden ticket question.
Michaela, I think we just have a connection problem. We don't hear you.
All right.
I think we need to go to the next question. We lost Michaela. We come back to you in a moment as soon as the connection is better. So there is a question to me in the meantime, to us here. Which are the concrete details related to non-exclusive licenses in the contracts? What if the beneficiaries decide to go for exclusivities? Is there a monitoring system, mandatory application in place? So the details are and will be fixed and laid down in the grant agreement we conclude. And we have quite an established system of ensuring and monitoring progress with projects. And we have a strong leverage there. And that is that our payments depend, after the first advance payment, depend on the fulfillment of the grant agreement. And this is also how we can monitor compliance with these provisions, with the exceptional COVID provisions. Now, we heard from Siobhan quite clearly that exclusivity is not always appropriate. And this is, I think, also clear. We see, and this is formulated in our manifesto, we see this, the open access provisions are a bit different, but the royalty-free licensing is certainly highly exceptional, and the non-exclusivity is exceptional. But I think we can see how it works in practice and whether we can move a bit further with time and experience, like we've done with open access. At the beginning, Sylvia mentioned it was related to open access and established policies. Okay, Michael, I get a signal that we could hear Michaela. So I hand back to Michaela to make the point, knowing that in 3 minutes our session will stop. So Michaela, please, very briefly, and then I would ask all the other three for final statement.
Thank you. I think we have to find new incentives, because incentivizing is really the golden ticket. It requires a cultural change in our thinking of research. There might be some innovative examples and best practices already out there, and I would call upon my colleagues in the digital space to make these examples and best practices known. What are incentives that work for you? Share it on Twitter, whatever tools.
I'm very sorry, I don't hear anything. I hope you are in a better situation, and I'm sorry if I interrupt Michaela or our speakers.
Fine.
But considering that we are coming to the end of the session and that we do seem to have connection problems, I am closing this session now with a very warm thank you to you who have signed this manifesto. Thank you for setting the scene, for leading the way in sharing research results to fight the COVID pandemic. And I do hope that you have gained today more followers, that we will have more followers for the manifesto, and help contributing to a good solution, good response, which will help us. And Renaud made it very clear, all the implications for our societies, economies, for our social fabric, democracy. So the sooner we can end this, thanks to research innovation and shared results, the better. Thank you. Very good connections for the rest of the day. and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.